Dusty Rhodes, you wrote the letter to yourself in the future. So, I know this is something that people often do, but is that something you do in your real life? And do you then reflect on them down the road?
Don't. I don't do that in my real life. I write about things that I'd like to see for myself, and I look back on my journals and kind of see like how I've grown, how I've progressed. But I think that's something that a lot of the things that I speak about in my rhymes are either something that I put into practice, but things that I'd like to see being practiced by myself more often. So that's been something that I've seen spoken about, like in terms of speaking to your past self. You know what I mean? What would you say to your younger self? So I envisioned in writing this song, like, what would I say to myself, 40 years from now? What would that conversation be in terms of the expectations for the future self? What would that conversation be in terms of how I'd like to see, myself adapt and transition to, my more mature self, how I'd like to see myself adapt and transition in the creative space. So yeah, I mean, I think that reflection should be a 360. And oftentimes we look back, and oftentimes I myself look back and instead of being future forward. So.
And one of the things you talk about also in there was being the best from your region, and you're from Southeast DC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, my favorite thing about Southeast DC was the Mirage nightclub. If I've been there when I got to see many people there, but one of my favorites was KRS-One I saw perform there. But
Nice.
but for you, how do you feel that you're working toward that goal and on your way to achieving being the best from the region?
Um, as an MC, I'm supposed to say I already am. I've achieved that goal, and it's not just my region, but you know, it might be within my peer group, mainstream and independent. Um, but I think that statement was a little cheeky, I guess, but just to kind of say, I'm I am I'm from DC. I have to constantly kind of remind people where I'm from. When I first came out, everybody thought I was from New Jersey or New York. And then I heard, of course, Atlanta, because I got my start in Atlanta, and then some random stuff like Chicago. But anyway, it's important for me to assert where I'm from, because it's a huge part of, creating me, and then, giving a nod to like some of the amazing people who came out of the city too, while also a little bit of bombast, as is expected of an MC. So, all of those things kind of inform what I write in that statement in particular.
Fair enough. And then on Dusty Rhodes, also, you talk about your early work being all verses, no choruses. And that's something that, artists have noticed. This is a common thread with people having to learn how to construct songs.
Mm-hmm.
So as you were reflecting on that statement, what were some of the key points in your development as an artist that enabled you to understand how to make songs that are more digestible for people?
I can't think of any like key moments. Maybe during performances, to not have that space where you can engage the audience and they can kind of rap along with, 8 bars as opposed to 14 or 4 bars, or however you want to construct the hook. I think feeling that and performing, like, I'm gonna have to learn how to do this, because this awkward space, I can do call and response or whatever, but I would prefer to be able to, have something here. And then just kind of playing around with, timing of hooks, because, there have been hooks where I feel like maybe it's too many words, or, I could have sang this on the, it's just during the course of your experience as an MC, you know, looking back on albums and saying, I want to do this now, or, you know, looking back on, you know, shows and stuff like that, examining and you know, studying other performers. But essentially that's what you want to get to. Like, I didn't want to be just an MC. I wanted to be I wanted to be a songwriter. And it can be argued that a song includes a full, complete song includes a hook. You can add a bridge and all that other stuff if you want to, but you got to have the hook. The hook brings them back.
Fair enough. Also on Dusty Roads, speaking of song construction, I was intrigued too because it uses the same or at least a similar execution of a sample that De La Soul used on Ego Trippin'. And when you're working creatively, Soul Messiah, etc., how do you, when it is a familiar sample like that, and also something real with Alicia Keys with You Don't Know My Name, there's sometimes you use samples that are more known by people that would know certain songs. So with that, how, if at all, does that affect how you write, what you write, how you approach a song? Are you thinking of the originals? How does that work for you?
It really depends. I think sometimes I play around with it more when I'm just performing. Like when I do something real, I might play around with the original when I'm performing. With Reconstruction of the Heart, we use the Ego Trippin' sample, and you know, I'm saying mercy, have mercy, kind of giving a nod to them in that way. But really, it depends on the beat, honestly, on whether I kind of highlight where that particular sample derived from. And I might give a nod to if it's another MC, you know, maybe shout them out in the song or a particular flow, or, you know, it just really depends. It really depends.
Okay. And something else that I like too is the Love Bug Starsky reference on The Great Escape with so you often reference a lot of not just people from the 80s, but like pioneers. So what makes you want to do that instead of, obviously you reference Rakim and many other people in many of your other songs, but taking it even further back than the quote unquote golden era? Why is that important for you?
Because it's the foundation. This is more than just a genre, it's a culture. And I mean, my very name is an homage to Sha-Rock, you know, who's a pioneer MC who is, you know, so dear to me. So if I can kind of give reverence to these people who were doing it when it wasn't easy, you know, who were fighting other societal ills and, you know, struggling to be heard and seen and have their voices amplified in any kind of way. It's the least I can do to kind of highlight these people who paved the way for us. And then also when I first started, I was doing shows. I was like so blessed or grateful, because when I first started, Atlanta, like their independent hip hop music scene was really, really dope. And there was a lot of shows. They were flying in like a lot of pioneers, like hip hop pioneers, to come do shows. And because I was working so hard, a lot of times I was able to open for them. So I'm opening for Cold Crush, and you know, I did a show at this place called Apache where they used to do like a lot of open mics and a lot of independent shows there as well. And I can't remember who I performed with. It might have been Drez of Black Sheep, but like, you know, this woman came up to me, her name was Sparky D, and she was like, yo, you know, I think you're so dope. And, you know, I was one of the first to do this and blah, blah, blah. So I was able to be in the space with a lot of these people who had started the game, were some of the earliest in the game. And that was really, really important for me, because that also helped to elevate my career. Because Atlanta, like those shows were big, then. You know, I don't know, like nowadays it probably would hit more if you open for J. Cole or something like that. But at that time where we were celebrating the purity of hip hop and true school and classic hip hop and stuff like that, it was a really big deal, and it still is, but we might not see that reflected, you know, society wide. But that was really important for me in developing my career. And there were so many people who saw something great in me and like propelled me forward and pushed me forward and gave me more and more opportunities. So of course I'm gonna hype them when I can.
Right. And with Sha-Rock, thankfully, I've been fortunate enough. Shout out to Dane for linking me with her, but we had her on Unique Access Entertainment as well. So, what was it specifically about her? Because there's so many great female rappers that were early on in the game. If she was the first, but what made her in particular inspire you to kind of make your name off of her?
Well, you know, I had already had my name before I had been introduced to her. And I got my hip hop culture lessons by watching Beat Street and, you know, Wild Style and Style Wars and you know, documentaries and stuff. And Soul Messiah showed me her and was like, you need to know who this is. Your name is Sa-Roc. There's someone whose name was Sha-Rock. And she's on Saturday Night Live in what was it, 1979 or something like that? Very, very early. And to me, like, she's in a group with these guys, and you know, seeing her on Beach Street with Debbie D, and I forget who the other, you know, woman was, but it was just really dope to see how much of a force we were and how present we were at that time in this you know, boys club, if you will. And but when I started rhyming, it was like one person. There was one woman MC who was allowed to dominate the game, as opposed to like when I was coming up with Lauryn Hill MC, blah, blah, blah. But when I started rhyming, it was pretty much like Nicki at that point. And it was more challenging for women to get not only the recognition, but the respect. And I thought it was so dope that these women at the time, you know, were also coming up at the same time as their male peers, but they were right in the midst of it and being amazing and exceptional and being in these dope films. Beat Street is one of my favorite, you know, old school films or whatever. So I was like, this seems, you know, right in alignment with what I'm supposed to do. So my name is already Sa-Roc, so, and it has, you know, different meanings or whatever. I kind of added on different meanings to my name. So I was like, now I'm adding on this homage to this, you know, incredible woman who held her own amongst her peers, just like I'm doing.
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about that. Also on the Rebirth, you have the MF Doom verse. So RIP and shout out to him. But what made that song where you wanted to put that verse?
I have a vibe, honestly. You know, that was the song that was done by Evidence. He produced that. And when Soul Messiah and I heard it, we loved like it was kind of grimy. It was kind of, I don't know, it had an edge to it. Almost, I don't want to say it felt unpolished, and a little quirky to me. And then like kind of looking back on some of like the vibe of some of the production that he would use in Rhyme Over, whatever, it felt like he would be a really good fit. And him being on the label, it made it perfect to be able to reach out and, you know, surprise, he was familiar and wanted to do it. And I was like, yo, like, this is perfect. This is epic. And it happened. And I'm still like super thankful for that.
Got it. Okay. On the original version of Sharecropper's Daughter, you start the album with Emergence with Saul Williams. And one of the things I thought was interesting was the Slaving Farms to Reaganomics. juxtaposition, because as we progress in society, as we're both well aware, people are trying to erase a lot of actual facts and real history, and
Absolutely.
and we're also forgetting segments of the population not only are wanting to do that, but also ignoring the fact of the relationship between one action and something that happens later. So,
Mhm.
given that this is something that's, I would argue, a hallmark of your work, why did you, or why is that something that you keep revisiting in your material?
Because it's something that isn't spoken about enough, especially within this realm, um this genre. I feel like we're particularly drawn to the flash and the rags to riches stories that we hear, a lot of people coming from humble beginnings, poverty, struggle, whatever. And now I got the bag and all of this stuff, which is fine. But I think that we need to really talk about how capitalism in this country was sustained off of our backs. And once, the country will throw us, particularly with Reaganomics, that was the first time we're able to see Black wealth, really Black people moving up to Black middle class. And at that same, during that same time, the war on drugs was happening, was starting to happen. And we oftentimes ignore the impact, both that we've had on the wealth of this country, but also the devastation that we're still experiencing from, decades, centuries before. And it doesn't really get talked about, this entanglement of, you know, want for capitalistic trappings, while also being complicit in not attacking that very system's exploitation of us as a people, as Black people. So it was a very important story, and like it was very important for me because me being one generation removed from an actual sharecropper, um, and hearing his stories, which I always used to kind of push away. They were too depressing for me, as a teenager. I was dealing with my own, emo angst and, all of my issues growing up during the crack era and stuff. But then as I got older, I reflected on how those things were kind of mirrors of the same um, symptoms of being oppressed in this country, and those stories being ignored and erased for so many years, with this idea that we've moved beyond it, we've moved past it, this racism doesn't exist, oppression doesn't exist. And I was like, I'm staring my father in the face. You know what I'm saying? I still bear the scars of what this has done, and we're going to talk about it. And I think that when we, as more and more people are speaking about generational trauma and, are studying historical traumas and the effects, the long lasting effects that it's had on people, and behavioral patterns, not just physiological, but mental and behavioral patterns. It's really important for us to use, I feel like it's important for me. It was important for me to use my platform to talk about it because I wasn't, absolutely, and I'm still not healed from some of the traumas that I've experienced. And I still am assaulted with every day as a Black person. So, yeah. Anyway, that was a long winded answer, but I think it merited everything I said.
I agree, and I think elsewhere on Sharecropper's Daughter Was Something Real, you talk about how the media circus will focus on the surface and keep society drugged up in these different things. And these are, as somebody that has been in the media for a long time, I see it happen and I know that it happens. And for you highlighting that, I think it's important, the layer of keeping society drugged up, because I took that in multiple double, triple entendres. So for you,
Mhm.
what specifically were you referring to?
Um, I mean, multiple things. I think, you know, right when I was writing that, I think I was thinking about like how the whole drug culture was being pushed. You know, we were losing a lot of artists, you know, to drug overdoses and accidental and otherwise. Um, and, you know, so I was speaking literally about that, but also how we're fed these kind of quick fix highs, you know, the jamming, the dope like party song or party anthem, or the wickedly entertaining, you know, headline about, you know, the Kardashians or whoever else. And all of these other more important, pressing things are happening beneath the surface. And you know, and then also dealing with like, I think at that point, like we're really reeling from like the whole opioid thing and the conversation with that, like the opioid crisis versus the crack epidemic, and the resources that were funneled into, you know, both the resources that were funneled into opioid crisis versus, you know, the criminalization of the people affected by the crack era. So it was like all of these things that I was kind of and the media's portrayal of that, you know, by no means one being more important than the other or more devastating than the other, but the way that the media even portrayed or posited this, you know, nationwide emergency. And we don't stop to think like, why is this being positioned this way? You know, why we just swallow it. And it is a circus, you know. Are you not entertained? You know, I go through phases where I just shut off everything because I'm like, oh my God, if I see this particular headline on another person's page when XYZ is going on, who cares? Like, who cares? We got to stop like letting ourselves be satiated by these little, you know, I call it like junk food. You know, and of course we deserve to be lighthearted. We deserve to be entertained. We deserve to laugh and have joy and not take everything so seriously all the time and not be heavy all the time. But when we do that at the expense of ourselves and the expense of the well-being of not only ourselves, our families, but our society as a whole, and let ourselves be led because of that, it's a problem.
In the beginning, hip-hop was ruled by the East Coast. Then the West Coast rose to prominence thanks to gangster rap. Straight out of Compton, crazy motherfucker named Ice Cube. Hip-hop changed the world. Gangster rap changed the narrative.
I'm representing for the gangsters all across the world.
And then changed the world again.
Cause I'll come and take your life away.
The history of gangster rap features unheard stories, unseen photos and documents, all with exclusive interviews from the founders and players who shaped gangster rap.
I think a real gangster rapper has to scare you a little bit.
The history of gangster rap written by veteran rap journalist Soren Baker. In stores now.
Yo, what up? This is DJ Quick. Be sure to pick up my homeboy Soren Baker's book, The History of Gangster Rap, if you really want to know what we do.